Welcome to the Startups Without Borders podcast. I'm Valentina Primo, and I'm the founder of this platform, this community, and this movement for entrepreneurs who are starting new ventures while starting new lives. Each week, we'll be sharing inspiring interviews with the most audacious startup founders while highlighting resources for anyone starting up. Gear up to get some real-life advice. You're listening to the Startups Without Borders podcast, episode 29. Today, we speak to Anas Alchalabi, or the Entrepreneurship Guy, as he's known in the streets of the Middle East. Anas is the MENA Regional Entrepreneurship Manager at Jusur, a nonprofit startup accelerator in the Middle East that has funded and created over 300 businesses in Jordan, Iraq, Lebanon, and Turkey. For the past 4 years, Anas has contributed to initiatives with governments, UN, the World Bank, venture capitalists, and companies like Facebook and Google to bring investment and opportunities to young founders in Jordan. In this episode, Anas gathers his experience with over 300 founders to unveil 7 things every entrepreneur should know before starting a business in the Middle East. Hi, Anas. Thank you so much for joining the Startups Without Borders podcast. I am thrilled to have you today.
Thank you, Valentina. Likewise.
Thank you so much. I mean, we had a talk yesterday. We started telling your story, and you said something that really impacted me. You said that you can tell your story and you can think about your story in a tragic way or in a hopeful way. What is the version that you are going to choose to tell us?
So that's kind of, it was really interesting. And this is kind of a mindset that developed over, a number of years in terms of, looking at tragedy, looking at chaos, looking at pretty much all the adversity that individuals, men, women, especially kind of, we were talking in the context of refugee, and young refugees specifically, you can easily look back at your life and think it's been a nonstop series of just one major life catastrophe after another. But honestly, we were talking about kind of looking backward and reflecting, and there's always kind of this strain. It's almost invisible of kind of, almost life trying to prepare you and trying to kind of teach you how to stand up and how to kind of rise with yourself to be able to just meet the challenges that you're being presented. Honestly, Valentina, I think I'm somebody who lived in Iraq and Syria and Lebanon, and I've been to other kind of armed conflicts places, and honestly, with everything I've seen, I'm choosing to kind of say it in the hopeful way instead of the tragic way.
That's really inspiring. I mean, to give a little bit of context and for people to understand your story, you left Iraq in a very dramatic circumstance, and you were very young, right? You were 11?
Yeah. I was kind of 12 or 13 at the time. It was after like a failed kidnapping attempt. At that time, a lot of terrorist organizations were looking at ransom from kidnapping to kind of as a mean to fund their operations, and me and my family we've went through a lot, IEDs and bombs, and one time I remember waking up at 3 a.m. and going to my parents' bedroom. I was like, Daddy, there's a bullet that got it through my room. I was like, oh, just look, I'm sleeping. Just you can come here and like get your pillow. It's fine. So it's kind of the traditional story, honestly, of it's kind of the same story in Iraq and Syria and everywhere, unfortunately. So we managed to live in Baghdad, actually, in the middle of like a civil war and a conflict for almost like 4 or 5 years before that kind of one significant event that kind of really turned the table, and it really kind of bonded me with my parents. Thinking seeing that. With everything that they've been through, they chose to stay. But when their kid, became part of the equation, they didn't hesitate and they left, Iraq within 12 hours. And I remember that day vividly. I packed like a couple notebooks and some clothes, and So yeah, and unfortunately, I didn't get the chance to go back to my hometown for almost 13 years.
Right, right. I mean, you were telling me it was a threat to your life, right?
Yeah. So it was one of my best friends, got kidnapped, and they forced him to write down the names and addresses of all of his friends. And they asked him, like, which one of them have their parents have jobs and stable income. And my dad at the time, he was just working as an admin worker in the central bank. And back then, he was my classmate, so we were like both, I think, 13. So he didn't kind of comprehend that, and he just said that, oh yeah, this is Anas, his dad owns a bank. And then when he was released, he immediately kind of told us about this, and simultaneously my parents started having threat letters, and kind of the same story you kind of hear all over South America, the Middle East, Iraq. So that's kind of the day that I remember. We were sleeping in the living room, and then my dad had his gun in his hand. So it was kind of unfortunately, yeah, that was my last memory in my childhood home, the home I grew up at, and where my mom taught me how to read and write there, and where I had all of my toys and all of my posters and my books. So it was a sad day, but honestly, this is kind of it was kind of it was a tough journey. I think that the next 10 years was a little bit difficult. We kept moving from one place to another. I remember one day in the 5th grade, I had to change schools almost 3 times in one semester within like just 4 months. So there was a lot of like going back and forth.
Wow. And all throughout, what was your relationship to your country?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I mean, I think it changed almost 4 times. I would say throughout the journey of migration, of seeking refuge. I kind of, looking back, I honestly, see it as a 4-stage process where in the beginning, I had resentment. I had kind of this strange mix of hatred and anger where, why me? Why is this happening to me? What have I done wrong? I'm just a kid. And I felt like I got in between, 2 powerful nations just getting in a fight, and I had no say in the matter. So it was really resentment. It was anger. And unfortunately, I've seen this a lot in various countries. And it can be very toxic, Valentina. It could be very, a lot of people got into self-harm in that phase. Yeah. After leaving Iraq, there was kind of a strange, I would say, phase. It was almost like 2 years of denial. And it kind of got to the point where everything bad in my life happened in my country. So this is not something I want to relate to. This is not something I want to associate myself or my future, to say the least, with. So it was a mix of like, I was desperately trying to kind of, learn English, learn Arabic and other dialects or accents, so I can just, not out of love for those languages, but just out of hatred for the past and for, all the experiences that a lot of people in my age and in my situation went through, and just kind of desperately trying to blend in, get the same haircut as everybody else, try to speak in the same way that everybody speaks, just so that you can disappear. You can be this like gray, invisible man in the streets of, whatever host country you're in. So that was the second phase. And then I would say the third stage was a relative calmness, mental calmness, where I would say this is when you spiritually or mentally or emotionally wake up and start to kind of take note of some of the behavior you're doing and why you're doing it, and what's driving you to do it. And it's kind of like, taking the wheels from your subconscious and just putting a mirror in front of it and trying to kind of understand a little bit more of who you are and why you're doing this, and look at things objectively rather than just kind of strictly emotionally. And that's when, for me, that was when I did a lot of self-learning, a lot of reading, a lot of like just talking to people and trying to understand if my perception of the world was actually accurate, and if the things that happened to me were an anomaly or that was the norm, and how do people kind of deal with it. And the last phase after that, and this is, I feel like, where I am right now, and that's after like 13 years. So it can take a while, honestly. Is the process that comes after calmness is kind of relative responsibility, and giving back. You start to realize that you have a solemn vow, and especially a lot of us who grew up in nationalistic kind of setting, we were pretty much brought up with the ideology that the one reason that you would give your life or is for your country. Right. So that kind of, I think, seed stayed in a lot of millennials, whether it was in Iraq or Syria, and I'm seeing this over and over. I'm getting phone calls from people who Syrian Americans who work at Google and Goldman Sachs, and on the other side of the planet, and telling me like, how can we give back? Right. So they've made it into that last stage of figuring out their responsibility. It also, Valentina, it comes to the realization that your survival was not accidental. The world needed to be rebuilt, and the surviving mechanism we had was we would take some of our people and we would ship them far away so they can be safe, and then they would develop certain skills and techniques so they can actually come back and rebuild. And you see this like classic story of like how Superman was escaping his home planet Krypton, or the classic example of Simba, where his father's kingdom collapsed and he was kicked out when he was a kid, but he had no means to actually do anything about it. So he had to like go in exile for, what was it, like 10, 20 years until he became a better version of who he are, so he can go back and actually fulfill his calling, basically. Yeah. And so, and I think different people process this stage differently. This is where it's pretty much completely up to the person. We were talking about the example of if you boil water and if you put a potato in that water and an egg in the same pot with the same environment, with the same boiling water, the potato will soften and the egg will harden. And I've seen this over and over again. People react differently to the same situation. So, I get it. The environment really kind of dictates part of who you are, but this is just one variable in a really, really complicated equation that is the human mind. So we all know, two siblings who grew up in the same family, the same, pretty much everything, the same, but they're completely different people.
Right. So you've supported more than 300 startups in the Middle East. You're a key player in the startup ecosystem. Would you say that's your version of giving back?
At this point in life, yeah. I mean, I was tormented between, being a naive, just kind of, volunteer, or, just working, almost exclusively in the aid sector, and also kind of experimented a lot in the private sector. But, I didn't really enjoy both of those elements. The aid community was very kind of donor centric. It was pretty much like just a consultant for rich, countries or individuals who would just tell them what to do. And then, the private sector, I'm just going to make my boss richer, and he would like just get a new car while I basically struggled to make ends meet. So, when I found this opportunity with Jasur of, I pretty much had the phone call from Berlin at the time. It was, I think, 2018. And, they told me, would you like to actually bring both of those worlds together and help refugees start businesses? And that's been my full-time job for the last almost 2.5 years. We've had more than 5,000 refugee and host country entrepreneurs go through our program. We've started more than 300 small businesses and startups. We've invested in 50 of them. And as of today, we have a 75% success rate. So, 3 out of 4 businesses we've supported are still surviving to this day. That was like a few months into COVID. And yeah, our entrepreneurs are kind of impacting their sectors in a dramatic way, whether it was the financial, health, agriculture, retail, technology, education, food. I mean, you name it. And I really love the fact that the program that we have is very founder focused. We realize that there's no such thing called a company. It's just a group of people coming together to solve a problem or deliver value. So by being kind of human centric, founder centric, that's, I think, a lot of where the value of our work comes in.
Right. It's not just about supporting startups. It's supporting the entrepreneurs realizing their dreams, right? Realizing that their vision. I love that. So Anas, you went back to Iraq after 10 years not being there. What did that feel like, and how did that change or impact your plans?
So honestly, Valentina, that trip was pretty much the highlight of the decade. It happened on completely spontaneously. I was working with a Swiss investment firm, and there was somebody that was supposed to do an investment training in Baghdad, and in the last minute their visa got canceled, and I literally got the call that, like, can you be in the airport within 2 hours? And we're not asking, your plane ticket will be sent to you there. So I had like 20 minutes to pack for a trip that I was waiting for almost 13 years, half my life. So it was something. It was a journey through memory, through pain, through joy, through love, and hatred and fear and anticipation. And honestly, it really kind of helped connect the dots for me. After leaving Iraq, I've lived and worked in more than a dozen countries in the Middle East, in Europe, and I was, I guess, trying to escape the fact that I had that part of my past kind of, hidden there. And when I left, part of me, was strong enough to put those monsters in a cage, but I was not strong enough to actually face the monsters. And I felt like when I went back, that's when I was actually kind of strong enough to, go back into this dark place in my mind and just revisit a lot of the reasons why I kind of, locked those monsters away instead of just confronting them. In terms of my current life, it really kind of helped put connect the dots in terms of what we do, meeting officials and policymakers and investors and meeting entrepreneurs, meeting, Iraqi youth who, despite everything that was going on, they were super hopeful about the future, and they were starting, businesses from their bedrooms and from their, parents' basement. It really kind of made what we do in terms of an entrepreneurship support organization even more relevant.
Right. I guess that's when you really feel that mission and that calling of entrepreneurship and the impact that it has, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the stories are endless, but once you see, look, the work of an entrepreneurship organization is, it's not fun. You have a lot of Excel sheets, you have a lot of documents, but behind those Excel sheets and behind those documents are the lives, the countless life of entrepreneurs, of Middle Eastern refugees and customers and students and patients, and it's incredible. Honestly, it brings me to tears.
Right. It's beautiful because every story that we hear of a refugee entrepreneur or a migrant entrepreneur leaves you speechless, right? They're so inspiring. And yesterday you said something that was really, really impactful. You said your resilience can turn you into a millionaire. Where did you get that positive mindset? How do you work with that positive mindset?
I think it's realizing that you're luckier than you are. It mainly comes from hope. One of the nice things about switching from capitalism or communism, when I was growing up in Iraq, into a capitalist society is seeing a lot of opportunities that's going straight kind of into people. Realizing that the journey of entrepreneurship is difficult. It's pretty much like a storm, and some people choose voluntarily to go into that storm to kind of build their resilience, build their skill set. in order to kind of be who they want to be. For refugees, they're thrown into that storm, without any consent. So the hope comes mainly from making the best of your present situation and saying, pretty much embracing adversity. There was a quote from Winston Churchill. He said that if you're going through hell, keep going, because you don't want to stop, because you'll just stay in hell. But, if you found yourself in hell, keep going, because at some point you'll just reach the border and then you'll make it to the other side, to the rainbow. And you know what they say, you can't have a rainbow without some rain. So honestly, it comes from making the best of what you have. It comes from connecting the dots, looking backward rather than forward. No refugee can design his or her life for more than a few months at a time, and maybe a year. But kind of this is where the mindset of turning crisis into opportunity comes in. There's a lot of pros and cons for being a refugee entrepreneur. I mean, you're talking about combining two cultures together, which is something that gives you an advantage over your own countrymen and women who stayed in your home country and the entrepreneurs in your host country. You bring pretty much two perspectives, which is priceless in the startup world. You also kind of you build your resilience. You have more to lose by not trying to be an entrepreneur. And honestly, for non-refugee founders, I would say the equivalent of that resilience is going to the gym every day for 2 months would be a good practice for what it takes to have the resilience to be a refugee entrepreneur.
Wow, that's a very interesting metaphor. Anas, now you've supported so many businesses, over 300 entrepreneurs in Iraq, in Lebanon, Jordan, Turkey. What would you say are the key tips, the key things that every entrepreneur should know if they want to work in the Middle East?
So that's kind of a great question. I guess in terms of the top 7 things I would say is number 1, know your calling, know your reason, what kind of drives you, what made you want to kind of get into entrepreneurship. Right. For a lot of people, it's money. I haven't seen rich employees, only rich employers. So that's something that drives a lot of people. A lot of people do it because they want to claim their place in the universe. They want to have that impact. They want to have that journey. They want to have that legacy after them. And this is something you have to go back to because, the journey will be very daunting and cumbersome. So whenever you feel down, this is going to be your North Star. And I would recommend a book by Simon Sinek called Start With Why. So you need to have that kind of calling, that inner drive. Entrepreneurship, you can't have external motivators. That's just not going to work. Right. So that's my first advice. Know what's your reason behind it. Number 2, specifically for the Middle East, is realize that you have 2 Middle East. You have the bureaucratic, governmental, public sector, or large state-run organizations that are, still debating whether they should update to Windows 95. And you have the youth, the Arab millennials who are, on Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, and now Clubhouse. I'm still waiting for somebody to send me an invite for Clubhouse. I have no idea what it is.
TikTok.
So you have this duality, Valentina. You have this 2 worlds that are completely different. But you, as an entrepreneur, you have to account for both. If you just focus on one without the other, chances are your business is not going to take off. So get to know your market, get to know your audience, and plan accordingly. Right. My third advice is regarding branding. So when you start a business, the business doesn't have a brand. Nobody knows the name. Nobody knows what you guys do. The brand comes from you as the founder. If say nobody heard about Startup Without Borders, but then, people know Valentina. You worked as a journalist. You've traveled. You've lived in Cairo. So people know you. You have a personal brand. Right. So in the beginning, the business is kind of like a baby. It takes the brand of the parent, and in that case, the founder. So I would say, even before you start running your own business, work on your personal brand, work on your network, get people to kind of know who you are, so that when they hear that, Ahmed started, this company, the company automatically will get some legitimacy because they know the founder.
Right.
So that's my third advice.
That's such a big point. That's such an interesting
Absolutely.
point. People usually shy away of building their personal brand, right? The idea that I don't want to be a superstar. And it's not really about being a superstar. It's very strategic, right?
No, absolutely. I mean, you need to do it for your business. I mean, I know people don't like to brag about themselves, but you don't have to. There's smart ways to actually promote what you do, your values, so you can actually attract other like-minded people, and work on exciting problems that actually gets you excited.
Yeah. So what's the next point?
Number 4 will be kind of addressing the elephant in the room in the Middle East, which is, the monopoly is the large, illegal activities that goes on in armed conflict countries.
Yeah.
A lot of entrepreneurs find themselves competing with, I would say, large competitors that might not play by the rule, that might bend the rule or break the rule a lot. And honestly, this is something that I don't see a lot of people in our community talk about. We just we're living in this pink dream that, everything is legal and everything, I can just sue somebody if they did something wrong. Well, I mean, that might work in the US or Europe, but I would say if you're a small business, be very, very wary and aware of what are the threats, what are the possibilities of anything goes wrong. And, there's just find some allies, I would say. And it's different, if somebody's listening into this from Iraq or Lebanon or Saudi or Jordan, I don't know from where, but it's going to be different depending on where you are. But, this could be local investors or large organization that could support you, local governments or municipality, or kind of some program that can actually help you, protect you legally if something went down. Unfortunately, that's something that we need to kind of, open a dialogue and a conversation about.
Sure. What's point number 5?
Point number 5 is doubling down in hard times. Honestly, this is, I would say, if there's one takeaway you guys are going to take from this interview is understanding that stability is not good for startups. Ups and downs are good for startups. That means that you're pivoting. That means you're trying. That means you're experimenting. So, don't be afraid of stability. Just if you have a problem, you just keep grinding, experiment and see what works best. And it really comes down to your inner circle. It comes to your team. You need to constantly ask yourself if you have the right team that can take you forward. And if the answer is no, then, try to kind of see how you can tackle that, how you can fix that or kind of adapt to that. A lot of businesses are going through that with COVID. They just simply never worked remotely before. So you need to kind of know that. And honestly, if you kind of feel down as a founder, if you were hit by a big challenge, again, go back to the reason why you created the company. That's the North Star. That's kind of your inner motivation. And if that doesn't work anymore, then that means that the spark has vanished, and you should kind of see how you can restart that. Generally, I would say also, nobody wants to be a rich, successful, sad millionaire. So try to, do your best to kind of figure out how you can build the resilience that you need to do that.
Just repeat that last point. Number 7. Number 6, right?
Number 5, doubling down. The entire point.
Yeah.
All right. So number 5 is doubling down in hard. All right.
I'm going to fly there to kill them.
I know. Sorry. I literally went to the furthest room in the house. So number 5 is doubling down in hard times. You guys need to understand that stability is not good for business. Ups and downs are. That means you're pivoting, you're experimenting. That means you're trying new things. So don't be afraid of adversity as a founder, as a startup. It's good for you. Always ask yourself if you have, the right team, the right tools to kind of face those adversity. You need to kind of, be like a tank, ready to kind kind of get hits from all sides. And honestly, the best advice for doubling down in hard times is having the talk with your friends, with your family, with your loved ones, on balancing your work life aspects. Nobody wants to be a rich, sad millionaire. Right. So kind of figuring out exactly what makes you, what gives you energy, what drains your energy. That's something I would highly suggest entrepreneurs to do.
Definitely. What's the next point? The next tip of advice?
Number 6, we're almost there, is utilizing your surroundings. So one interesting fact I learned about myself is I almost know 1 million people because I have 1,000 friends on LinkedIn or Facebook. And on average, those 1,000 people know another 1,000. So 1,000 times right. 1,000 is 1 million. So you can ask somebody, hey, Valentina, could you introduce me to Muhammad Salah? And then, boom, you already know 1 million. So people are super friendly. I've reached out to random people on LinkedIn to ask them for help or advice, and you'll be surprised by the amount of support you get. So utilize your network. I would say also when it comes to choosing your co-founder, you need to be very careful about that. If you are a technical co-founder with multiple ideas, try to define your idea before kind of looking for a co-founder. If you are a business founder and have a technology idea, get a technical co-founder. No investor will talk to you if you're just a guy with an idea and you have nobody to actually build the product or the service.
Right. That's a very interesting point.
Yeah. And the last point is for first-time entrepreneurs. Go to a startup program, go to an incubator, go to an accelerator. You need the network. You need to know the experience and the journey of starting a business. Later on, when you're a serial entrepreneur, when you started your first business, kind of the journey. Then you can start alone. But if it's your first time, if you're still in your 20s, if you're still not sure about what are the aspects and the milestones when it comes to starting a business, go to a program. If you are living in a small country, there isn't a lot of opportunities. Reach for regional accelerators and regional programs that invest in your region. You'll be surprised by how a lot of them, are available out there, especially now in 2021. And, understand that also as an entrepreneur, you need to kind of be where the market is. You need to have some kind of an understanding of, say, the Italian market, if you're going to need to sell your product or service there. And that's where kind of the role of an accelerator comes in, because they can connect you with other accelerators in Italy. So, go to an accelerator if you're a first-time entrepreneur. And later on, you can start it by yourself. Nobody would kind of do that. I would say reject to that idea.
Right.
So those are my 7 points.
Right.
What do you think?
Very, very interesting. I mean, especially in 2021 now with COVID and the post-COVID new world, there's so many accelerators and incubators that people can access online in a virtual way. And that allows you to go beyond borders, right? That's something we saw with the Startups Without Borders Summit. It really enables to, go across borders, break down boundaries really, and access mentors, investors, incubators, and different programs for entrepreneurs anywhere in the world, basically. So that's a very powerful point as well. And I'm going to finish with one last question. I'm really curious to know, I mean, you've gone through this journey. It's taken you back to Iraq, right? And you have this very strong mission to support entrepreneurs. What's next for you?
Yeah, so that's a great question. I ask myself that every morning. Valentina, the entrepreneurial mindset is more relevant than ever nowadays, and a lot of the needs and the systems are being redefined. A lot of excuses are being eliminated in terms of, I can't quit my job. Well, millions of people lost their jobs, so they don't have that excuse anymore. Yeah. I honestly thought that entrepreneurship is the answer. My grandfather started a newspaper in Iraq in 1936. That was like two or 3 years before World War II. And that business kind of managed to generate enough income for almost 17 family members. I have a big family to kind of pay the bills for a few decades. And the newspaper was shut down by the communists in the 1960s, and it was real. There was a whole drama, but honestly, it was kind of the best decision that my grandfather did. And I'm trying to kind of take that, a lot of the, the lesson learned that I had from, working in Germany, in France, in Jordan, in Qatar, in Turkey, and really bring a lot of those into my home country. The way I look at it, Valentina, is that a lot of us, Arab millennials and former refugees, we look at ourselves like a meteor going in space, just collecting momentum. And a lot of us want to make that call and just book that plane ticket and go back. But a lot of us also know that there's a lot to be learned, and we want to create the biggest crater we can do when we were in our country. So right now I'm in this phase of like collecting the momentum so I can go back to Iraq and create the biggest crater I can do.
What an incredible metaphor to end the interview. Thank you so much, Anas. It's been a pleasure. It's been super inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valentina. And thank you for everyone listening.
Thank you. Have a great day. At Startups Without Borders, we've tested lots of marketing tools, but email is my favorite. It's the only tool that allows me to talk directly to our community of entrepreneurs. So how do I attract new subscribers? It all starts with an email marketing tool. I personally use MailerLite. In MailerLite, you can easily build lead generation landing pages. I know, it feels I'm talking Chinese, right? Landing pages allow you to establish contact points to create as many leads for your business as you can. MailerLite has pre-designed templates that you can customize in the drag and drop editor. It's simple, super cool, and captivating. If you want to try MailerLite, click on our special link in the episode notes, create a free account, and get all premium features for an entire month. You like what you hear? You should definitely follow us on your favorite platform. So next time you're on Instagram or Facebook, type Startups Without Borders and check out all the videos, the stories, and the resources for you to become a legend.